Okay, we're going to call the WPCA January 27th, 2020. That's weird saying that. WPCA meeting to order at 7:55 p.m. First item on the agenda. Second item on the agenda is approval of minutes. I'll entertain that motion. Made by Ms. Dancho, seconded by Mr. Perillo. Any conversation, discussion on the approval of the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 7-0. Councilman Connor just excused himself. He's not feeling well, so thank you. Item number 3, Town Attorney, Town Engineer report. Mr. Casey.
I had sent my memo out. What I like to do is pick out just a couple of the items rather than going through the whole report, just so that you can make those actions that you need to make or point out this important information. So the first one I wanted to let you know is on my item number 1. We are, as we talked about, going to be sending out a letter to the private owners of property that we have found that may have connections of stormwater to the sanitary sewer, and sending them a letter letting them know what we found and asking them to contact us so we can work on a way to remediate the problem that we found. So we'll be sending out letters. I just want to let everyone know that, you know, if you get a call, you can refer them to us, or you can call us and we can explain any specifics that need to be explained. The next item is the pump station project. We are out to bid right now. We do have one thing that came up in the last couple months, and that was the Oak Bluff pump station. We pulled that out to make it an alternate in the bid, and the reason is we need to get a variance for constructing that in a specific type of flood zone, and that variance hearing is on February 4th. So if we do get the variance, we will then incorporate that into the base bid, and if not, we'll leave it as an alternate and decide what to do at the later time. But we will be getting those bids in after that date in February, and then we're presenting the bids to the authority for award at the next meeting. In addition, remember that we had that bond ordinance for that project that is, I think, it was on the table at the ordinance committee. I don't know if it still would be. I should check before next meeting, but that bond ordinance we still need to act on in order for us to apply for the Clean Water Fund loan to fund the pump station project. So we were waiting till the bids came in. We'll have the bids by next month. We can instruct the ordinance committee, you know, to proceed with the dollar amount that we'll need, and then they can approve the bond ordinance, and then or send it to the council for the council to approve the bond ordinance, and then we would apply for the Clean Water Fund loan to fund that project.
So let me interject for 1 second. Jay, if I can ask you for a second on that regarding the bond ordinance. I know we had it on the past ordinance agenda. It was a tabled item. Are we doing that? Is it going to ordinance because it has to be bonded through CIP?
No, I think John's funds is the Clean Water Funds, isn't it?
Yeah, but we have to do a bond ordinance to secure that loan.
That's outside of the CIP.
That's outside, yeah, so that's why it's got to go to ordinance.
Basically, it's restricted to WPCA.
Okay.
So.
But that ordinance was drafted in before the ordinance committee.
Correct.
Right.
So it just is on the table there.
So we'll discuss, no problem. We'll get back to that one.
Through the chair.
Madam
was
Dancho.
Removed off the ordinance agenda when the new council was.
Right. Good point. Thank you,
We
Councilwoman.
need to put it back on the agenda.
We have to put it back on because it essentially went away with the past council.
Right. Okay. And then next item is item 3. We had received the repair of sewer bid. The low bid was Michael's Pipe Services out of Watertown, Connecticut. They're a large company that has an office in Connecticut. They do a lot of Connecticut work. We've checked the references, and they got very good references. So we recommend the award to Michael's Pipe Services based on their low bid that they submitted. I did note we were going to add to that bid, the work that we were anticipating to do on Linden Ave, we talked about that in coordination with that road construction project. So we'll be awarding it to Michaels, and they'll be issuing purchase orders against that bid.
Excellent, thank you.
So we'll need you to approve that award.
You're asking for approval tonight?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll entertain that motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Dancho.
I motion to move the request for a $20 million
No,
what is
no.
it?
Mr. Casey, if you could restate that.
This is item number 3 on
Item
my
number
memo.
Oh,
So
you're
it's
on item
the
number
sewer
3.
rehab,
Sorry.
sewer rehab bid. So we'd received 7 bids, and the low bidder was Michaels Pipe Services.
Okay, so I will make the motion to approve the bid of Michael's Pipe Services.
Okay, motion's on the table, seconded by David Harden. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes 7-0.
Also, related to that project, the engineer that did the bid work hadn't put in the contract for bid support services. So last time we bid it, there was not much effort needed, and so it wasn't needed, so he didn't put it in this time. But this time there was numerous questions. We had a lot of bids. You could see bids of people that we don't know where they from, from Jersey and Vermont and New York and Massachusetts and Missouri. So there was a lot more involved in the bidding support, and they're asking for their cost to be reimbursed for that task, and they're provided backup support for $6,600 worth of work.
Mr. Harden? Did you have a question, Dave? Okay. Ms. Cann? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I did check their contract. That item of work was not in it. I did compare it to the other bid that we had gotten for that work, and they did have an item, and it was actually for a little bit less than this amount. And even with approving this amount, we're still under what that other engineering firm had for this item. So it seems to be the item was missing from the contract.
So you need a motion?
We need a motion for that.
I'd like to make that motion.
Motion by Mr. Harden,
$6,600 for the report, bidding report,
Yeah, it was the bid assistance.
bid assistance report. Okay.
motion by Mr. Harden, seconded by Mr. Perillo. Any discussion on that? Okay, all in favor? Chair votes aye. Motion passes 8-0.
And then item 4 is our coastal resiliency project for the treatment plant. You remember that we applied for a grant, and that we reported that FEMA was looking favorable on our grant request. And in order to move it now to the next stage, FEMA needs the state of Connecticut to submit a flood management certificate. And that requires some work to be done by the town. So we asked the engineer for a proposal to do that work. That's the engineer that did the coastal resiliency study and did our concept plan for the treatment plant. And their proposal is $31,000 to do the work that's needed to put this flood management certificate together. It includes hydraulic analysis, site plans, preliminary design level plans, flagging the wetlands that need to be. So there's a substantial amount of work, and it all goes toward the preliminary design of the actual project. So the work is necessary to get started now so we can do the flood management certificate, and that allows FEMA to move forward with the grant on the project.
So you need a motion to approve the 31?
Yes.
Correct. I'll entertain that motion made by Mr. Harden. Do I have a second on that? Seconded by Ms. Dancho. Any discussion?
Just one question,
Mr.
John.
O'Brien.
How long do you anticipate this would take?
This will take probably a month's time, because we're trying to expedite it. so they can get it to the state, so the state can get it to FEMA. They're looking to award the grant in April, so we need to get it in, fairly soon.
Any further discussion, Mr. Can?
A question on the last paragraph under this item 4. John, we have just, it's very complex, all the items going on. So we've just approved roughly $700,000. And this last paragraph mentions that we also approved capitalization of 1.7. What additional funding, can you compare that 0.7 that we just authorized to the 1.7 to what additional funding?
Well, let me
Well,
let me do this. Is this, because the motion is to vote on the 31, is this discussion on that 31, or do you want to have that as the next? Yeah, okay. I'm not shutting you down. I just want to, let's complete the voting on the 31,000. So we had a second on the table. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Chair votes aye. Motion passes 8-0. Mr. Can.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that the funding of the projects we have just discussed has already been appropriated by the authority in last year's capital plan. So we're not talking about new funding at this time. For the coastal resiliency project and our pipe rehab project, we will, you'll see in our 5-year capital plan that we will be asking for that funding. Yep.
And anything else, Mr. Casey?
Then lastly, we had a application for connection to the sewer system from a religious community, and when we went to calculate the charges for the connection fees, it wasn't clear how we should make that calculation and how much they should charge for the connections. I can read what I wrote here, or I could just cut to the chase, which is I think we need to try to deal with this as a separate category rather than a typical commercial or residential development. And I don't know, we can make some proposals ourselves, or I don't know if you have a different way you wanted to.
So one of the things, and I'd like to ask you to potentially do this for us, is we discussed this among, what are the options for, is looking at other surrounding communities and seeing what they do in a situation like this. And then I think we could come back in next month and make that determination based off of that information gathered. I'm not opposed to seeing what's out there, seeing how everybody else does it. But as we mentioned, putting stipulations in that if it was a church today and then 15 years from now, the church sold and it sold to a development for 100 units, we got to make sure that that is going to be taken up in how we do that. So I'd like, if you guys can come back to us next month with a good analysis of the surrounding communities and how they deal with that, I think we can make an educated decision off of that. Mr. Can.
2 points. One, how are current churches being charged for? Is that, so we can look
this
at
is
that?
only for new connections, so it's just the one-time connection charge that we charge
Connection charge
when they
only.
connect. So other churches have already been connected. This is the first new church connection since the charges went into effect.
And their utilization would come under the commercial?
Well, that's the question.
Okay, so it's a two-part question, and then why, this is a, let me call it a social use property, a church. If we were to have a theater open up, that would also be kind of a social use property that's not residential?
Theater, I would think, would be under commercial, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, it could be another question would be a nonprofit or a profit. In this case, they're not for profit. I think they're kind of their own category, but they could overlap into other categories as well. So those are all good questions. That's what I wanted
That's why,
to
yeah.
talk about. It deserves some discussion.
For example, the Shriners or the YMCA?
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Casey.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Poisson.
John, did this new connection at this religious property, they know they're going to get charged the connection fee, we just haven't determined what it's going to be yet.
Correct, and what we did do is we charged them their sewer assessment, and they did pay that, so they could get started. That is a levy that the WCA already applied. This would be connection charges that would offset that.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to amend the agenda to add the approval of a chairperson to WPCA.
Councilwoman Dancho, thank you. It struck me that we, again, as a new WPCA, it's an independent board, and I stated at the last council meeting, we have to vote on, excuse me, the chair for the WPCA. So, motion to amend the agenda to add nomination of chair for the WPCA. Do I have seconded by Mr. Poisson? Any discussion on that?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to, do you want to vote on that?
No, go ahead.
I'd like to nominate Christopher Pia as chairperson of WPCA.
Okay, motion seconded by Mr. Poisson, seconded by Mr. Hardin. Any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll call the nomination to I'll call the nomination to a vote. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you, Councilman Dancho. Mr. Casey, all set?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hyde, how are you, sir?
Very well. I'd like to start off by
Okay. At your last meeting,
Okay.
it was decided that I would come up with a formal resolution to have $150,000 put into a contingency fund to handle some of these emergency appropriations that come up from time to time. The reason why this appropriation is being done is because in the past, out of desperation, we have pulled from other funds, and it was kind of distorting our budget. So, having said that, I'd like to make that formal resolution tonight. And I think everyone has that resolution before them. And it's 2020-01. It's concerning an appropriation from fund balance. Whereas the WPCA superintendent needs to replace and/or repair equipment on an ongoing or emergency basis annually. And whereas the WPCA needs to budget funds annually to cover such expenses. 4-year analysis is attached as a reference on past unscheduled repairs and replacements. Now therefore, the finance director is requesting that an appropriation from fund balance in fiscal year 2020 be used to cover essential WPCA repairs. So basically, we're putting $150,000 into the budget for this year to accommodate some planned expenditures that are needed.
Any questions for Mr. Wahlberg? Again, this is what we discussed at the last meeting, and I know we hadn't met, did not meet in December, so. Okay. Seeing no questions, I'll call this resolution for a vote, which was a part of the agenda. All in favor? Chair votes aye. Motion passes 8-0. Thank you, Mr. Wahlberg.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hyde, on with the rest of yours.
Evening, Chairman, Board. The monthly report, just to keep it brief and move on, you've all had an opportunity to read through it. The plant is running well, or ran well through the year of 2019. We ended the year on nitrogen 106 pounds below permit rather than the 30 pounds that we were over the preceding year, pounds per day. So we're in very good shape. We did our basic pump station maintenance, repairing a couple of pumps and rewiring some starters and so forth, some heaters. Plant maintenance, same sort of thing. The preventative work being done on the tanks. And I'm going to skip down to item number 4, the effluent pump bushing. On one of our effluent pumps, we had a failure we were talking about back in September. And we had, I had asked for $11,000 to do repairs on that pump. As we pulled and evaluated that pump, it turns out that it had more significant increase damages. It needed all of the bushings and bearings replaced. It's a $50,000 job. At this point, it is ready to be completed and reinstalled, but I would like to request an increase of the $39,000 to finish the repairs on that effluent pump, and I'd like to take them from the account that Jay was just referring to.
So just so we're clear, Mr. Hyde, you're requesting that line item be increased from 11,000 to 39, so an increase, not an additional new 39.
An additional 39 to
An
bring it to
additional
50.
39. Okay. Any questions? Mr. Hyde?
Well, here we go again. I won't give you a hard time. What's the condition of the overall plant? I mean, again, we're replacing stuff like, you know, water. I mean,
That is very true. The condition of the plant is significantly improved from where it was when I took it over. Actually, if you look at the line justification, the second page on this, you notice that first year we were looking at about $388,000. The following year, about half of that, $184,000, $153,000. Part of the reason for this was a miscommunication. When we were doing the budget, that we didn't know where to put this request, and somewhere in the process, this $150,000 got overlooked. But the condition of the plant, it's no longer a new plant. It was rebuilt 2006 to 2009. We're doing 5 of the pump stations over at this time. We've got 5 to 7 other pump stations out there that are not getting done. We will continue to have various things. That's why this $150,000 line is becoming part of the budget. It's because we will continue to have large equipment failures that are going to be unforeseen. They're aging. There has been some talk of an evaluation of the plant to find out exactly where it stands at this point, to get a longer view, better view of the long-term needs of the facility. But at this time, the condition of it relative to where it was.
I'm pretty disturbed about the fact that we continue to spend money, and you've made that, the same statement you made when I first became a councilman, that you made tonight, you made it then. So I want to know.
What's that?
I want to know, number one, do we have maintenance logs where we're keeping up with this equipment? I know that there are some points where there is mechanical failure and some things are bound to break down. Are we doing maintenance on these things so we're not caught at the last minute where one thing starts off at 1,000 and now we're down at 40,000 for it? I mean, there has to be some give. I know you're asking for the 150,000, which you were given to be moved, but I'm sure once that's gone, you'll be back again to ask for another 250,000. And I'm not being hardcore with you. I just want us to, I want this plant to be at a point where, we're not continuously, sinking money into it. I don't really know what goes on over there. So I expect that you will kind of keep us informed of, the full assessment of the plant, if it's really in working order, or is it something that we just continue to sink money into, and the overall end is that we're going to have to rebuild the whole thing after all this money we've just sunk into it. So I'm not trying to give you a hard time. We're back at square one.
As a measure, in the difference of the operation of the plant used to lose solids on a somewhat regular basis. During the year 2019, we did not lose solids. We did on the 1st of 2020, unfortunately. We'll recover from that. Last year, we paid $52,000 in nitrogen credits. The plant's running well enough that it's anticipated that we're going to receive $250,000 to $300,000 worth of nitrogen credits because the plant is running better. We have much of the equipment in significantly better condition. However, we do have a 10 to 15-year-old plant that's running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a very corrosive environment, and it will continue to need repairs. But it is being cared for well.
So the motion on the table is for the $39,000? That's what you want? That's what you're asking us for?
An additional 39 to go with the 11 to finish repairing the pump, yes.
Any other questions on this line item? Mr. Can.
On this line item, no, but I'd like to ask a general question regarding cost of maintenance.
Let's hold it on, since there was a motion on the table right now, so I'd like to.
I'll make that motion to spend, what is it, roughly 50 grand
Yes,
in total?
yes.
For that.
Motion by Mr. Harden, seconded by Ms. Dancho. Any further discussion on this? Nope. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Just one thing, Chris.
Mr. O'Brien.
Actually, it's 39,000. 11,000 was approved back in September, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's 39,000.
I stand to be corrected. $39,000 for that motion.
Okay, we'll call that one to a vote. All in favor? Chair votes aye. Motion passes 8-0. Go, you can continue. Mr. Can, you have the floor. You had a question.
Thank you, Chris. Jay's not here. One question was, when the bond that we took out to remodel the plant back in 2006, 2009, do we know what that bond was paid last year?
I don't off the top of my head. I can check with him first thing in the morning.
And the plant may have, aside from the sewer lines, park those for a minute, the pump stations, park those, the plant itself, the infrastructure of the plant, the mechanics, does it have maybe a worth of $60 million? The question was, in an operating facility like RWPCA, what would be the annual cost of replacing through the normal course of business? Not just maintenance costs, but as we said, capital replacement. Is that a number that, some comparative number we could get from other WPCAs? That if theirs was similar to the size of ours, of a similar age, that they may require $300,000 annually and have the normal of capital investments on top of preventive maintenance. We could also normalize them. Thomas, I'm not sure if that's a question for you or one we need to pass.
That is probably a number that would be based upon, rather than looking for comparable size plants, although there would be some that is some factor in there. It would be more of a cost per million gallons per day processed. And yes, there are some numbers like that, how accurate they are. One of the things I want to step off here for just a second, one of the things we shouldn't lose sight of is that a few years ago, well, I've been in this position for 3¼ years now. A year prior to that, they were looking at selling this plant. During the couple of years prior to selling it, there wasn't any maintenance going on. There wasn't any preventative work going on. There wasn't any repairs going on because, in my perception, we thought we might pass that along to whoever took over the facility. Is that the best plan? Absolutely not. Do I plan on repairing it? That's what we're doing.
So is that something, per Mr. Can's request, that you can maybe do an analysis on and get a few metrics out there based off the gallons per day?
I will take a look at
Okay, thank you.
And to close, I look forward to seeing that nitrogen debit as the right word. I don't know if it's a debit.
Credits.
Where we had to pay 50 last year, but because the plant's running more efficiently, you estimate $250,000 we may earn in regards to credits. So that's just a good byproduct. Thank you very much.
It's a measurement. We'll try to hold on to it. Thank you.
The idea of non-technicians keep things within the normal, try to normalize what we expect capital and maintenance costs for a similar plant.
Mr. Hyde, so,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Taveras, yes, sir.
So, sir, are you saying, are you saying that there's a reward for an efficiently running facility?
It's, no, it's not an award, it's a nitrogen removal program. It's a rather longer discussion that I'd rather put some information in front of you and have a conversation or do it another time, rather than trying to go through the whole process right now, because it's pretty detailed.
Okay.
But yes, plants that do not remove the required amount of nitrogen, or that put out more nitrogen than allowed, pay penalty. And those that are below the permit requirements receive the benefits of that penalty. It's a balanced system that the state government runs, a little bit of guidance through the EPA.
So, Mr. Hyde, to interject for a second, actually, Mr. Tavares, one thing I would make a comment to you as a new counselor is make a meeting with Mr. Hyde. He'll take you through the plant, as I did when we got on, and it's actually a really good eye-opening experience, and he'll be happy to walk you through all that stuff. It's well worth your time.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Hyde, any other further requests? I see something else.
There's one other item, one more request. It is tied with the same effluent pumps. I'm requesting $35,000. It's to purchase and install a VFD drive, a variable frequency drive, for the plant effluent pumps. We have a 3-pump system. What we're doing is we're upgrading that system a little bit. We've put a line into our effluent building, pump building, so that we can lubricate the seals and the bushings that just failed in a more controlled, uniform manner to avoid a future failure like this. This $35,000, we've been using city water for this. It's probably one of our larger uses. We will probably recapture this cost over the course of the next 3 years in our reduced water consumption, but it'll allow us control over the seal and bushing lubrication and cooling on all 3 pumps. They need to be individually controlled, so there's quite a control system in there.
And the 10,000 is your estimated approximate recoup in terms of how much? Okay. Any questions on this? Mr. Hard?
What was the amount again? I'm sorry.
$35,000?
And is that coming from the 150 grand that we moved?
Yes.
So we're going through that pretty fast.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just saying, let me have my thank you. All right.
Any other questions, Mr. Not to interject. Mr.
So can I make that motion to
You may.
$35,000 for the?
This man's spending $20 million. You don't ask him that many questions.
I like that motion to
Motion by Mr. Harden. Do I have a second by Mr. O'Brien? Any further discussion on that motion? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Chair votes aye. Motion passes 8-0. Anything else, Mr. Hyde?
That's all I have for today.
Okay. All right. Let me get back to my... Seeing no new business or other business, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Mr. All right, real quick.
No, the other 2 items on that list were previously authorized. They're just the remainder of that $150,000 I'm spending.
Would you like to motion? I saw a motion to adjourn by Ms. Dancho. I'll take a second by Mr. O'Brien. All in favor? Chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone.